Our next speaker is the fabulous Ben Courtice. I say he's fabulous partly because he was the previous convener of the Grassy Plains Network. My first day at work, there was an email addressed to him that said, "Can you please appear before a Senate inquiry?" So it's like, okay, so he dodged a bullet with that one. But Ben, let's talk about Ben. Let's not talk about me. Ben Courtice has a degree in botany with honours in plant ecology. He was a founding member of the GPN and is a member of AABR. He works as a bush regenerator for Southern Ecosystems Management. Please welcome Ben Courtice.
Thanks, Adrian. Betteridge's law of headlines says any headline that ends in a question mark can be answered by the word no. Obviously. But in ecology, every rule has exceptions. Anyway, I'm going to talk today about some things that I've learnt by making mistakes out in the field mostly, a bit about EVCs and about how to do restoration, and you may all know it, but I can assure you there's lots of other people out there who don't, so hopefully you can spread the word for me. This is at Yallock Barring Reserve, looking north over Jackson's Creek in Keilor. This is mapped by the state government as the escarpment shrubland vegetation class, or EVC. About 10 years ago, it was planted out with a lot of sheoak and Rhagodia parabolica, which you can see some of in the picture. They really took off during the La Nina years. This slope also has some regionally very rare daisy species growing on it. Now, I really love sheoaks, but I worry there's so much they might shade out the rare daisies when they all reach maturity. This is a west-facing slope at Kelshields Reserve in Bacchus Marsh. It's on a sedimentary soil over basalt. It has this enormous patch of gold dust wattle, which is common on the dry edge of the ranges around here. It's commonly planted as well. So if you're a land manager thinking to plant gold dust wattle on your escarpment, you might check the Atlas of Living Australia, see what its distribution is. Here's a map of records around Melbourne, around Port Phillip Bay. It's really common in the eastern suburbs, but also in the west, right? So it's fine to plant it. So this is all the records only up to 2000, which is about when people started to do a lot of indigenous plantings on the plains. And you can see there are almost none recorded on the Keilor-Werribee Plains from colonisation to 2000. So should we be planting on basalt escarpments? Maybe not. Anyway, back to the Kelshields Reserve. That's the north-facing slope. It's a great grassland dominated by spear and wallaby grasses and uncommon C4 grasses, Eniopogon nigricans and Paspalidium constrictum. So, unfortunately, we planted some large sections of this escarpment with sheoaks and grey box about 5 years ago, in keeping with the modelled EVC, which is plains grassy woodland. But some of this unique grassland might be lost eventually as a result. Did we do the right thing? In this picture, that's a burn I did the other day, you can see a good section of grassland or grassy woodland on Corriett Creek's banks. Nature Kit modelling tells us this was originally riparian woodland. So Rick Van Keulen, who was mentioned earlier, told me that decades ago this whole section of creek had a lot of good native ground layer plants, like this bit of grassland that's left, and that a lot was overplanted with too many eucalypts and shrubs. And the ground layer in these sections, I can confirm, is now mostly weeds like Earharta and Galenia and ivy, not like this good section. This west-facing escarpment at Yallock Barring Reserve is pretty grassy now. It used to be much more shrubby, but the shrubs were African boxthorn, so we removed them. And about 7 years later, apart from the remnant lightwood, you can see tree violet is popping up everywhere thanks to the birds spreading it. And you can see in the top centre a fairly dense multi-species planting that's fairly recent. So this is nearby to that on a south-facing slope on basically unused private land, big patches of Bursaria. Satellite images show they've been there since at least the 80s, possibly much longer. And you look at how the plants have arranged themselves. Berseria seed doesn't go far, so it grows in thickets. Around it, there's a lot of serrated tussock and other stuff, and it might be replacing an original native grassy ground cover in those areas, perhaps. Note that it's a big thicket of mostly one species, not like the mixed species, even-spaced planting in the last slide. Near Bacchus Marsh again, this is Parwin Gorge. Left side is north-facing. Moona and white cypress are major components of the canopy. The south-facing slope, south-facing, gentler climate. Sorry, you can't see it very well in the pic, but it's quite grassy, has blue box growing in the gullies. You won't find any mention of those species in the escarpment shrubland EVC, of course. Here's a grassland at Keilor, on a southwest-facing basalt slope above Taylor's Creek. There's planted trees at the top of the hill, remnant river red gum below, and in between is this great Themata grassland. So if you go online, the mapping in Nature Kit shows the existing grassland is actually under that blue stripe of streambank shrubland. And now maybe that's just shoddy mapping because you can see it doesn't actually quite follow the creek, but if you're managing this location and looked up what was supposed to be there, you might decide to restore the existing grassland to a shrubland. Obviously they haven't, but hypothetically. And so here's a nearby slope, bit steeper, same aspect, dense woodland and shrubland. So she oaks have always been there. Talk about them being there in the 80s and probably before that, but heaps more have been planted. Would that grass, it's still quite nice by the way, but would that grassland 2 slides ago have been better if we planted it out like this? I tend to think that grasslands are rarer and cooler than tree plantings, and we should probably look after them where we find them. Okay, so I don't like doing slides with words on them, but here's some words. Basically, here's some of the variables that create a myriad of different niches and refugia where all sorts of things can survive and thrive on escarpments. So we talk about escarpment shrubland reflexively as what's supposed to be on escarpments, or we talk about Themata grassland like it's one thing, but it's not uniform. It's not even there at all sometimes. And also, even when it is, the shrubs, or the Themata in the grassland, is not necessarily the interesting part about it. That might be the rare daisies, right? So imagine a bozo like me some time ago using this as a template to restore a site. Look, it has manna gums. How easy is that? 15 per hectare. It's a fast-growing, large tree. Quick results to show off to the supervisor. Let's put in 30 per hectare because, you know, some of them will probably die. So, reality check. The rare daisies might not survive that many manna gums. 15 per hectare is on a evenly spaced on a 25 metre grid. In my view, these are best used for offsetting. Offsetting requires a benchmark because offsetting is about pretending that one bit of vegetation can be made equivalent to another and then traded. So it's regulated nature destruction. Using a one-size-fits-all benchmark as a guide to restoring diverse ecosystems will in fact homogenise them. Unfortunately, I still come across a lot of people who just basically use this as a planting list. Offset managers might be legally required to work to the benchmark, but the rest of us can look for more scientifically sound approaches. Otherwise, you know, all our plantings end up a bit like that sugar gum planting in the background. That's out near Bacchus Marsh as well, even though with more different species perhaps. Look, even when we're required to follow EVCs, we can be, as bush regenerators, we can be a bit creative and subversive, right? Plants don't need to be planted on an evenly spaced grid all over the site. So, put them in clumps. put them each species in a dense cluster, let them self-thin or self-spread over time, and you can truthfully tell people, oh, that's how they grow naturally. People here who I've worked for might recognise this from recent conversations with me as a ruse I use. So variability is really obvious on escarpments, and I talked a lot about escarpments that I've worked on here because they work at scales that we recognise easily. They work in metres and tens of metres. It's like forests. People love trees because they're big and they're obvious, right? A change of 20 centimetre elevation in a grassland can have profound implications for what small herbs, mosses and grasses and so on might grow there. So we have to learn to recognise those small variations in a grassland too. It's the same concept. Grasslands have their little gill guys and drainage lines and small stony rises and rocky areas and not rocky areas, and just like an escarpment shrubland, there's a lot of variability that creates that diversity in the landscape. Creating a dense thermiter sward in a grassland, 20 tussocks per square metre or something if you manage it the right way, that can be really good for weed control. I've definitely done that, and it does work quite well for a lot of weed control. And it is supposed to be a thermiter grassland, okay, so what's wrong with that? But if you make it that dense, like a really dense shrub planting on an escarpment, where are your rare daisies going to live? So I guess if we're trying to restore ecosystems to preserve biodiversity, we also have to restore and protect landscape diversity. Like I said, hopefully all you guys get that, but a lot of people out there don't think that far when they're planning their restoration. And unfortunately, the default approaches of defining EVC benchmarks and so on in bureaucracy and the regulatory system, which do manage some of the work we do, often tend to go in the opposite direction. As a bush regenerator, you can be creative and a little bit subversive on the job and try and do a better job of it, and we should all strive for that. Our job, of course, is circumscribed and fixing the laws that permit and regulate the destruction of nature for the most part is not part of our job description. So please join up with the Grassy Plains Network and AABR and your favourite political party and everyone else that's actually trying to fix the broken laws. Thank you.
Good to have someone mention politics. Kind of important. Like we've got some momentum here, and it's just great to see so much grassy action and grassy love in one place. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. Fantastic, and that's it.